That's great.
Hello, everybody. My name is Abdul Alnashawati. I'm actually conducting an interview for Intro to Modern Middle Eastern class with my older brother Fathy. We're going to be talking about the settlement as Egyptian into the United States. Hello, Fathy. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good, good. So, out of curiosity, now tell me a little bit more about growing up abroad into the Middle East and then coming and settling into this country.
Well, I grew up in Egypt. I finished my education in Egypt. So, um, after I graduated college, we I went to Kuwait and I lived there for about 8, 10 years until the war happened in 1990, and it was really tough on everybody. We had to flee the country from Kuwait, drove all the way through Iraq, Jordan, Syria,
Oh, and which war were you talking about? The one in
the
1990?
the Gulf War where Iraq invaded Kuwait. So we went back to Egypt, and it was really hard to go back and leave everything in Kuwait. So we tried to migrate to the United States. So we stayed in Egypt for a couple of years, worked over there, and then we came to the United States. But we came with our values and principles, the way we grew up, and our culture. And it was really, really hard to fit in the United States with this culture. There's so many things that are done differently, and um, we had a hard time adjusting in the United States. But finally, we met some like-minded Egyptians and Middle Eastern in New Jersey, and kind of like they took us into that community, and that's made it a lot easier for us to adopt and adjust and raise the kids. Still, the kids have some conflicts between the Egyptian culture that we raise them on and the society culture that tried to force itself on them at school and their friends and everywhere we go.
So, like, when you say essentially like the difference in cultures, like between the two, um, what are you thinking of, like in the sense of what is the biggest difference between both of those cultures? Essentially, is the biggest difference like, do you feel like that the American culture is more liberal, a lot less conservative? What
True.
is the emphasis when it comes to? I know a lot of Egyptian families tend to hold strongly on family moral values and beliefs. And in that standpoint of view, like the difference between the American culture in the sense of growing up or raising kids into this country versus the Egyptian culture that we're, of course, accustomed to.
That's exactly what was going on. Is that the United States, the society here is a little bit more liberal than the way we grow up and um, how we conduct our business and the family ties between the in the Egyptian culture we are more family oriented than the American society, unfortunately. And we when we came here, it was kind of like felt a little bit lonely and out of place. But thank God for that Egyptian community that we got into. So the kids and everybody can actually have a common conversation, common culture of what's right and what's wrong, what's allowed and what's not allowed, as far as being conservative, because Egypt is more conservative than United States. United States is more liberal, and they allow things to happen, or it was okay for them in that culture to for things to happen that is not okay for us. For example, growing up with girls not allowed to have boyfriends as an Egyptian culture, but here a boyfriend is it's a must. It's a common thing in the American society, and it was really tough when I have two girls, and you have to explain to them where we come from, and this is not our culture, that boyfriend girlfriend relationship, and she has to wait until she graduate and get married the proper way.
Got it. So essentially, as a Egyptian with a Western education, in the sense of very affluent, very progressive by nature, we are notorious in our family for having some of the highest education compared to other Egyptians and everything. You'd probably say that the biggest hurdle is not necessarily a language barrier per se or anything like that, but essentially it's the whole diverse, the complete 100% difference between the American culture norm and the liberal aspect versus the conservative aspect of the Egyptian culture. So, other than that, do you feel that you were able to kind of like relate to other Americans that were into this country in the sense of friends wise, not necessarily, family wise or raising kids or anything like that, but in the sense of your social life or your social aspect? Like, for example, in Egypt, I know we have different things like, for example, like cafes or lounges that you're able to go hang out with your friends, smoke some shisha, so on and so forth, versus here in the United States, the whole cultural norm of hanging out at a cafe doesn't necessarily exist. So was it easy for you to kind of, make your friends and maintain your friends and so on and so forth, or was it a little bit challenging for you? What do you necessarily look for in the sense of when you like regulate your social aspect of life, in the sense of having your friends who you keep around you, where you go out, what do you do on weekends with your kids, and so on and so forth? So how do you dictate, what do you bear in mind when you're dictating all these aspects of your life?
The most important thing is to have something in common. So with the Egyptian group that we have here, we do share the same culture. So every weekend we gather at one of our friends' house, and we barbecue. The kids are get to play together, and have fun, and we sit and chat, drink coffee, drink tea, and then we go home. But in the meantime, fitting with the American society, you have to find something in common, and most likely sports. And it was very challenging before, because every time you go somewhere, everybody's talking about what happens in the football game, and who is scoring higher than who, and statistics from old games. But it was very hard for me to relate to that, because I did not grow up here. But I found a sport that I can relate to with some American people, which is kite surfing. And we meet on the weekends or whenever it's possible to go kite surf, and that's the common conversation we had, is that sport. So that's how I make friends other than Egyptian or out of my culture, is to find somebody with a common interest, whether it was sports or business or art or whatever, and then you just make friends that way. And I found it in doing sports.
Gotcha, gotcha. And then how about settling here in the United States? Was it hard for you to kind of establish yourself? Was it hard for you to, obtain a house, get a job, and essentially, start providing for your family and standing up on your feet?
It was very hard, because of the fact that I graduated from Egypt with a bachelor degree in accounting. But when you talk to somebody, not everybody knows what Alexandria University is and what's their standard is. So they don't look at you as a bachelor degree or a college graduate. They look at you as like you're a high school graduate. So it was very tough to find a job and go, elevate in that position, and move up, because of the fact also that your manager is looking for somebody to relate to talk to, when other than work. And it was very hard to talk to your superiors if they're talking about football, baseball, or basketball, and talking about who scored how many points, or the highest points, or the MVP in 1972 or 1985, which I didn't grow up here. I don't know this fact. So there was a cut off in the communication when it comes to me and my superior. So it was a little bit hard and challenging. I had to do a lot of homework, a lot of research to catch up on all the history that I missed growing up in Egypt, to be able to relate to my superiors and actually establish a relationship with them.
Fair enough. So would it be easy said if you essentially, is it, how can I say this? Um, is it easily noted rather that due to the education that we received, not necessarily the historical experience that you encountered through, it's easy for you to communicate and get along with other people. Now granted, you were missing that experience aspect of things, of which you had to do research for.
Correct. Yes. It's
Okay.
easy. It's easy because education is education, and Alexandria University is one of the top universities in the world. So my education in Alexandria University put me on a level to compete with other graduates from United States or any other university in the world.
Sounds good, sounds good. So would you say, how long have you been in this country so far?
16, no, 1991, since 1991.
So I want to say that's
Or
about
92, I'm sorry, 1992. The invasion happened in 1990, and then we went to Egypt, stayed for 2 years, and then we came here in 1992.
So about 24 years.
Correct.
Okay, so now every time you go back and you visit Egypt, what do you feel? Do you feel like you're a stranger or you're an outsider, or you feel like you're back home because as the years progress, Egypt also progresses as a society and as a whole. Do you feel like you missed out on a lot of opportunities, or you missed out on a lot of things, or do you feel essentially like a sense of belonging and that's where you should be?
No, I feel it as a stranger. I feel out of place. When we leave, when I left Egypt, I left it in a certain state of mind, and I always, when I go there, I think I'm gonna find it in the same way, but it's not. It evolved and changed. People changed, so when I go there, I feel I'm out of place, and when I come here, also I don't feel 100% fit. So we're that generation that feels lost between the two countries because you grow up in one, then you live your rest of your life in one. But hopefully that next generations where my kids are born here, grown up here, they will not face that problem in the future.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Now, if you had the choice, would you move back to Egypt, or would you settle back in Egypt, or would you stay here and continue your life here?
I do have the choice, and I choose to stay here and continue my life here. That's where I belong now.
Why?
That's my home. That's where I live. That's where the made my future and my present. That's where I raised my kids, and that's where my kids will stay. This is home.
Well, fair enough. Thank you so much on enlightening me in the sense of the experiences that you've had when you grew up there in the Middle East, and out of the war, essentially, you got refugeed out and settled here into the United States. And I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate your help and everything like that. And looking forward to it all.
You're welcome.